welcome to a brand new episode of the Travis on Sports podcast. As always, I'm your host, Travis Tyler, here to update you on the latest news surrounding the sports world and provide some of my own thoughts on some of the issues. Today is Monday, March 6th. Growth of the sport in the States. It seems like younger people are losing interest in baseball as kind of a boring sport, so I can see why some of these changes need to be made to keep entertaining, but it's just, as a baseball traditionalist, it's kind of hard to see, and the lockout is really not helping with that issue. MLBPA clearly on the right side of this. They're making concessions to what they want to be able to see games played, but they shouldn't be giving in to every demand that the owners in the league have. They should stay strong on a lot of the player payment issues and stuff because they need to maximize their value while they're still able to play the game and be set up well enough for after they're done playing the game. Now, some of these rule changes are really stupid, in my opinion. I think the runner on second base to start extra innings is really stupid. I'm never going to come around on that. I guess there is some need for a pitch clock, but I'm not a huge fan of that. Bigger bases is extremely stupid. I mean, I guess there's a player safety issue there, but it seems like a weird thing to do. But all those changes, I don't see how that makes the game really better. I can see how it avoids injuries and stuff. I don't see how it makes it more entertaining, but the players conceding to those components, it shows how badly that they want to play. I can be okay with banning the shift since it's going to lead to some more offense. I think that's a fair change to make, even though it messes with the manager's strategy, and you really shouldn't be making a ton of changes that mess with the strategy of the game. From my standpoint, that is. Like I said, I think the ghost wins thing is stupid. It's Major League Baseball. It's professional baseball. This isn't some beer league softball game where you're starting in at bat with a 1-1 count on you and you can, hit too many fouls and get out. If they ever brought those kind of rules into the MLB, I think everybody would freak out and have a panic attack. It's a competitive disadvantage for the lower seeded team that has the worst record. It probably already has enough to overcome in that series, and it's not a huge thing to overcome. But giving anyone an automatic win just seems really dumb. Kind of ruins the competitive balance to me. I'm someone who likes to see parity and competitiveness in leagues, and that's probably trending the opposite direction. Plus, on the other side, it could take out some of the drive, some of the competitiveness from the better team, where they come into the series, they know they have a one-game lead, feel like they don't need to try so hard, don't need to be so focused and locked in to win the game, and it could have a negative effect on them as well. But like I said, don't know what it's going to look like when we come back in. I don't like a lot of these ideas, but anything to get closer to playing baseball in 2022. The NFL has suspended Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley for the 2022 season after he allegedly bet on games during his time away from the team last season. At the end of October, early November, Ridley spent time away from the team to deal with his mental health, and it's during that time he's thought to have bet $15,000 on games in a 5-game stretch in November and placing bets from Florida from outside of his usual state of residence. ESPN's Adam Schefter has reported that the league discovered a series of parlays Ridley placed that included bets on the Falcons to win, but the league has also said there is no evidence that he used inside information when placing the bets. He was a first-round pick by Atlanta in 2018, quickly became one of the top young receivers in the league, and so far in the offseason and since he took that time to deal with his mental health, he's been a highly sought-after trade target. Atlanta has told teams that it's not looking to trade him, and he is eligible to apply for reinstatement to the NFL next February. The suspension also leaves the Falcons very short-handed at wide receiver, with only second-year Frank Darby from Arizona State under contract going into this year. And with the franchise tags and everything going into play and new contracts being signed, the wide receiver market is starting to dry up when it was once one of the deeper positions on the market. Speaking of NFL free agency, the official starting date is March 17th, but the open negotiation period, legal tampering, I know people don't like to use tampering, the T word. It's got negative connotations, and it's what teams get penalized for. But that open negotiation period where teams are allowed to contact pending free agents and negotiate deals begins on March 14th at noon Eastern before free agency officially starts a few days later. The league has also announced that the salary cap will be set at $208 million, up $26 million from last season's salary cap. Tomorrow is the deadline for teams to designate players with the franchise tag. The tag pays the player based on the salaries of the top 5 highest paid players at his position, keeps them on team for one more year. It's a guaranteed salary. Teams do not have to use the tag on anyone, but like I said, doing so keeps them on your team, keeps them from hitting unrestricted free agency and signing with another team. So far, Chiefs offensive tackle Orlando Brown, Browns tight end David Njoku, and Bengals safety Jesse Bates have officially been tagged. Other candidates for the tag would be Chargers wide receiver Mike Williams, Packers receiver Devontae Adams, Buccaneers receiver Chris Godwin, and Dolphins tight end Mike Gesicki. There's also rumors that the Cowboys could use theirs on tight end Dalton Schultz. If you want to track who gets tagged, I will be posting a comprehensive list on my football blog site, thefootballsavant.com. There will also be articles about free agency posted over the next couple weeks, as well as a short podcast on the NFL Combine later this week, possibly another podcast talking about free agency next week. So be on the lookout for that at thefootballsavant.com or on the Football Savant podcast, which you can find on all the same channels you can find this one on. Now, to open salary cap space, teams have begun to release veteran players. The Patriots have released starting linebacker Kyle Van Noy to add another $4 million for them to spend in their salary cap. Wide receiver Amari Cooper and defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence of the Cowboys have also been rumored to be options to cut. It's not just players and organizations making headlines in football these days. The sports broadcasting landscape is about to make some big changes as well. A lot of well-known network personalities and announcers are changing networks, have their contracts up and that kind of stuff. ESPN has reached a deal with Fox's Troy Aikman to move him into the Monday Night Football broadcast, while Brian Griese will go from Monday Night Football to a on-field position as the quarterbacks coach for the 49ers. Networks are also after Al Michaels, who is not returning to NBC. He's been rumored as a candidate to join Aikman on Monday Night Football, but it's really anyone's guess where he ends up at this point. Fox's Greg Olson and NBC's Drew Brees have been rumored as possible replacements for Aikman on Fox's number one broadcasting team alongside Joe Buck. Also, Amazon has reached a deal with ESPN's Kirk Herbstreit to make him part of their NFL Thursday Night Football coverage, but he will also continue to make his appearances on College Game Day and on ESPN as well. Colts tight end Jack Doyle has announced his retirement from the NFL after 9 years, all in Indianapolis. Did spend a brief training camp period with the Titans, but all of his full seasons in the NFL were with the Colts. He's 31 years old, went undrafted out of Western Kentucky in 2013, became one of the most underrated and reliable tight ends in the NFL. He's a pretty good blocker, great hands, not overly quick or anything, but he made plays in the passing game. Took over as the starting tight end for the Colts in 2016, improved every year, made the Pro Bowl in 2017 and 2019, and his appearance in 2017 made him the first ever Western Kentucky football alum to make the Pro Bowl. Battled some injuries over recent years, but he still finished his career with 295 catches for 2,729 yards and 24 touchdowns, which is not bad for a guy who started his career as the fourth tight end on the depth chart. Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers still has not determined if he wants to stay in Green Bay by recent reports. The team apparently offered a new contract that has been described as market-changing by some people, but the quarterback still has to decide if he wants to remain in Green Bay. Several teams are expected to make trade offers for his services if he wants out, which should be expected when dealing with such an accomplished player of his caliber. If you would have asked me a week or two ago, I would have said he's gone. Now I'm much less confident and probably would lean the other direction and say he's staying in Green Bay. While the college football playoff won't be expanding anytime soon, there are some more proposed changes to rules in college football. One would allow the conferences to review targeting calls that were made in the second half of games to avoid the carryover suspension from the first half of the next game. Basically, now a targeting penalty, if it's called in the first half of the game, that player sits out the second half of the game and is eligible to play the next week. But if it's called in the second half of the game, that player is out for the rest of that game, plus the first half of the team's next game, which seems like a little bit of an excessive punishment, particularly when a lot of those calls are made when the player's not trying to commit a targeting foul, or not purposely trying to injure one of the players. This would not change the ruling in the game. The player would still have to sit out the rest of the game, but it would allow him to play right away during the team's next game. There's also a proposal to report and investigate teams for faking injuries. Both these proposals will be voted on by the Playing Rules Oversight Panel in a meeting on April 20th. Both rules address issues that have plagued the sport. Targeting has been a chief complaint among college football fans since it was implemented. Yeah, the notion to keep the game safe for both the tacklers and the ball carriers, the runners, is warranted, makes sense, but the application of the rule has been inconsistent. It's really a judgment call by the referees, and many of those judgment calls by the refs are disagreed with by the fans, and often they're players assessed a foul just because of the way the rule is written, not because he really did anything particularly wrong. It's not always, but sometimes that's what happens, and there are times when it looks nothing like targeting, and the targeting call is still upheld. So this proposal attempts to address that, but to be honest, is it really going to fix anything? The team would still be without a player for the remainder of the current game, and how do you go about overseeing and regulating who is or isn't suspended the following week? There's inconsistencies in the calls on the field, even after review. Will the reviews, later in the week really make that much of a difference, or would they still have the same inconsistencies? And how do you make sure there's no bias or favor in one team's direction, especially depending on who their next opponent is? And then with the faking injuries thing, obviously the teams need to be held accountable for that, and it's a really stupid part of the game, and it does happen, whether you think so or not. My question with that is, how thorough are the reports and the investigations going to be? How swiftly are punishments going to be handed down for that? And what exactly are those penalties going to be? From what I read, the investigation and the punishment for that is up to the conference. So is there set criteria that the conferences all agree on and are aligned with and looking for what constitutes punishment and what constitutes as a fair punishment? Because if it's up to the commissioner, each commissioner is going to have a different opinion, because there are many different perspectives and different interpretations of what a fair punishment is going to be. So I don't think that really fixes anything either. Former Arizona State quarterback Jaden Daniels has announced he will be transferring to LSU. Daniels was a top recruit in the 2019 class and spent 3 years as the starter in Tempe for the Sun Devils. He threw for over 6,000 yards and 32 touchdowns and led the Sun Devils to an 18-12 record. He also has over 1,000 rushing yards in his career. The move gives LSU a veteran Division I quarterback who's played a lot of games and can enter the competition with the other guys they have there. LSU traditionally has struggled to find consistently good quarterbacks. There are a lot of above average quarterbacks, but Joe Burrow is really the only one that over the last decade or so that I can recall that has really made a difference in his play. Maybe Daniels does that, but honestly, to me, yes, he's an experienced player, brings that dual threat ability, but because he's much more of a runner than a passer at this point, I think right now, yes, he's probably the favorite to become their starter, but it's also possible that somebody else beats him out, has a better throwing ability, and makes a better impact on the offense, so you can't really hand him the job just yet. Oklahoma has announced plans to unveil a Baker Mayfield statue after its spring game on April 23rd. Mayfield is a former walk-on, transferred to Oklahoma from Texas Tech, had to walk on at both places, won the Heisman Trophy, and became the first overall pick by the Cleveland Browns in the 2018 NFL Draft. The statue will become a part of the school's Heisman Park that features 5 other players who have won the Heisman Trophy, and they have also said that Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray will also be added eventually. He is their most recent Heisman winner. College basketball season is winding down. We are just 6 days away from Selection Sunday and the bracket reveal, which will air after the Big Ten Tournament Championship game this Sunday. Conference tournaments started last week for some, and bracket experts have had to adjust accordingly.